All right, let's go. Seattle 37, Detroit 31. Final in overtime for the Seattle Seahawks. Both teams now 1-1. It looked a lot like last year's game. Bit of a shootout. Both quarterbacks played really well. You saw Geno Smith just a really good game from him again, where we said, hey, last week wasn't great, but he had a bit of a roller coaster ride last year, and he, got back up and played well. Tyler Lockett with a huge game, finding the end zone twice for Seattle. But Detroit's offense, similar. Jared Goff played really well, outside of one pass, which turned into the first interception he had thrown in 300-something passes. It's a pick six by Trey Brown. That ends up being a huge part of the game, of course, because it went to overtime. But I don't think this was Goff. I mean, I think both offensive lines played really well. We'll talk about that in a minute. But just a really good offensive showing from both teams, and Seattle wins the shootout.
Yeah, which is a big result for them, given what happened week one, how bad that looked, and the expectations for Seattle heading into the season. If they had fallen to 0-2, even with an improved performance this week, that would have been pretty concerning. But they didn't. They bounced back. They won the game in addition to having the good performance. So big by them. Both starting tackles, now sophomore tackles, were out of the game. So Stone Forsythe and Jake Curran were their two tackles. One held up, I think, slightly better than the other. But the fact that offensive line didn't collapse with that situation going up against Detroit's pass rush was a big thing for them. And then the offense generally looked pretty good. I mean, all three of those top receivers that they had a good game. Geno Smith, I think, generally played really well, but had a couple of bad plays in there as well, which in a game like this probably ended up, being a big part of the difference, even though they end up winning the game. But this was a fun game.
Yeah, I'm impressed by Seattle's offensive line. We spent a lot of time talking about those injuries and the fact that the Lions have, it's not an elite pass rush, but Aiden Hutchinson, really good. We saw that night one against Kansas City, and in this game, 7 out of the 17 pressures that the team had that a player accumulated came from Aiden Hutchinson. But I don't know, maybe I've overrated the depth that they have there with Charles Harris, and I don't think we've overrated James Houston. But he was a situational guy. He only rushed the passer 3 times in this game, so you just didn't get any help besides Aiden Hutchinson. So good job by Seattle, and maybe a little concerning from Detroit that they're not able to take advantage of, basically the late round or undrafted backup tackles who are early in their career. The Lions are unable to take advantage of that in the Dome, and Geno Smith picked them apart. This was not one of those games where Geno's dropping 4 or 5 big-time throws. He was just hitting the open man and moving the ball and playing a good, effective game, like you said, outside of those couple plays, right? So I think that's a little concerning for Detroit in their defense, and impressive by Seattle that they took advantage, and then also, again, took advantage with the backups in there.
Yeah. So there was a play in this game where there was offsetting pass interference penalties, essentially, on DK Metcalf versus Joseph in the end zone. And this felt like just a bad, I think it didn't feel like it was proportionate to how that play worked, right? Which was all DK Metcalf executing the illegal play. He had a hand in his face mask, was sort of wrenching him to the side, was just generally abusing him physically in the course of this play. And then only right at the end, after wrenched by the face mask out of the way, did Joseph reach out and kind of grab DK Metcalf just to try and not be thrown to the side. Did he have any kind of illegal contact? And that was enough for the refs to say, well, that's defensive pass interference as well. Now it's offsetting flags. When a play is all one guy making the illegal contact right up until the very end, that shouldn't be offsetting penalties. That should be offensive pass interference that maybe resulted in some illegal contact by the other guy, but only way after he was being illegally contacted himself. Offsetting penalties should be designed for, equal crimes being committed here. That's not what happened in this play. That just felt like a bad interpretation of how those rules are supposed to work.
You don't get the offsetting pass interference penalties often. Was it DeAndre Hopkins and Jalen Ramsey or something? It's like these two great players are going at it and they're getting physical. It's like, just throw the flag on both of them. But you're right. It's usually somebody initiates and then that leads to a response. And I just want to highlight the game winner for Geno Smith in overtime. It's again, I don't know how concerning this is for the Lions because it looked a little bit like the opener against the Chiefs. It's Aiden Hutchinson gets the win. He gets the pressure, but there's no one else. And the quarterback, it's Geno. He avoids it, right? I mean, that's what Mahomes kept doing on Thursday night. When there's one pressure, when there's only one guy winning or even close to the quarterback, it's not nearly as detrimental. If the quarterback sidesteps it, then they actually have room to run and there's just no help. I'm a little concerned about Detroit not having the pocket collapsing and just not having enough. And from a Geno Smith perspective, 3rd and 2, you've got the field goal in hand. You'd have to give the ball back to Detroit, but just a beautiful play to get outside the pocket away from Aiden Hutchinson to hit Tyler Lockett, who gets in for the game winner. And it's a lot easier in overtime if you just score the touchdown. Don't put the ball in your defense's hands to make a stop. So big win for Seattle. I do want to shout out Jared Goff. I mean, this is one of his better games, man. You take out the pick six, he's 28 of 35 for 323. Him and Josh Reynolds, just an outstanding connection so far here. Two touchdowns, but Goff was throwing the ball really accurately up the seam. Amon-Ra St. Brown to Reynolds. They had the Khalif Raymond play on the flea flicker, 36-yard touchdown. You got to have more Khalif Raymond plays. You always have to. Jahmyr Gibbs watch. Not impressive right now. 7 catches for 39, 7 carries for 17. So not much there for Gibbs. But I want to shout out Goff because I think he played a really good game, and him and Geno, again, battling back and forth.
Goff played great. Beautiful pass up the seam to Reynolds for a touchdown. The Gibbs thing, though, is relevant because David Montgomery got hurt in this game. Montgomery, I think, would have been running reasonably hard, but they don't have – so whatever about the dynamic of how they've been deploying Gibbs and he needs more work and all this kind of thing, they're not going to give him David Montgomery's job. Like, those are two separate roles within this offense. There's the straight ahead between the tackles, bell cow type of runner, and then there's whatever it is they're trying to turn Jahmyr Gibbs into. But David Montgomery being down, they don't have an alternative to that guy on the roster necessarily. Craig Reynolds was the guy who's going to come in and take that job based off the remainder of this game after he went hurt. And Reynolds had, 3 attempts for 7 yards. So I don't know that Reynolds is going to be the guy that's able to do what David Montgomery does either. So that's a worry or a blow to Detroit coming out of this game, is losing David Montgomery. The other thing I had as a note in this game was the single greatest individual troll in the NFL, C.J. Gardner-Johnson, was out-trolled by the Seahawks. Now, number one, remember, he's always the guy drawing the idiot penalty in the game by annoying people into punching him in the head or whatever. He got flagged after a big defensive stop early in the game. I think he made a tackle for a loss on Kenneth Walker, but then got up and bumped him, got in his face and got the taunting flag or whatever. It's usually the other way around that works. And then he made this thing about the blue ski masks, and Seattle had one of those in the locker room and was busy trolling him after the game. So in an unusual turn-up, the master troll was in fact the one being trolled.
A double loss for the Lions in C.J. Gardner-Johnson.